Alright, hello everybody, I'm Intermediate O, I'm an Evangelion fan living in Tokyo, and today I'm going to try and do a spoiler-free review of the final Evangelion film, Shin Evangelion, or Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, Thrice Upon a Time. Alright, so I saw this movie the day it came out in theaters, and I saw it 3 times total in one day. And so since this review is spoiler-free, but I also think people are probably still going to have, questions or comments about specifics, and I don't want things to get out of hand in the comment section. So if you want to ask anything that you feel like might be spoilery if another person read your comment, please, when you comment, just, press enter a bunch. So that way when your comment uploads, you have to press read more to actually read the comment. And that way, like, nobody else would potentially get spoiled by just passing by it. All right, so if you want to ask something like that, you can. Please just hide your comment, and I will then do my response in the reply so nobody can see that as well. Okay, and I'm not going to beat around the bush in the beginning. So I'll tell you right now that I am pretty negative on this movie, which is actually probably one of the more surprising things. Is I feel like I have not seen a ton of negative backlash in both the Japanese side of things or even like the foreigners who have seen the film as well here in Japan. The one constant I have seen though is that pretty much anybody who does comment on the movie, even if they do like it, pretty much everybody just admits that they didn't really know what's going on, which is one of the reasons I did want to see it so many times. And is one of the reasons why it took me so long to make this, because I did want to make sure that I pretty much have a good grasp on basically everything that happened in the movie. But you can pretty much ask me anything about the movie, and I'm pretty sure I could answer it. And just to be quick about it, I'd actually like to give you kind of a one-sentence review of the movie. And so if I had to do that, give a one-sentence review of it, I would just say, it is worse than The Rise of Skywalker. Yep, that's a pretty good one-sentence review. But also, it's so similar to Rise of Skywalker in so many ways. On the other hand, if I had to give you a one-word review of the movie, I would definitely make that word cowardly. Okay, but before I get into all the juicy stuff, all the nitty-gritty of, like my dirty, deep thoughts about the film, I'm just going to try to go over the more objective stuff first, just to kind of warm people up so they don't get like too angry at me or anything. Number 1, art and animation. Alright, so on this aspect of the film, I would just like to say that no, the film does not look awful at all. And if you compare it by, the majority of even televised anime, or even theatrical anime, like, it is of good quality. But overall, I would have to say that the movie is both visually disappointing from an artistic and an animation standpoint. I think the simplest way to put it is that the worst looking scene in End of Evangelion probably looks better than any scene in this movie. But I feel like I could probably also argue that for most of the rebuild so far. Because for the most part, animation and art is subjective, and definitely the execution of it in tandem with the music, the storytelling, the direction, all of that can kind of bring that to the forefront. And just, I feel like this film never does that in a way that makes it feel ever better than something like End of Evangelion, which is kind of like the crowning jewel in Evangelion's, performance so far. Like, it's kind of like the top of the top. Is some of the art direction better than TV series? Yeah. In general, though, I would not say I'm a fan of what I would like to call the Yamashita-fication of the designs in Evangelion. So for those who don't know, Ikuto Yamashita is one of the main designers on the rebuild films, and he's also like the original designer of the Evangelion mechas. But his artwork is very detailed, and it was never translated like one-to-one for the designs in the TV series to begin with, because it's just so overcomplicated. And with these last 2 films specifically, and with this final film specifically, actually, the Evangelion details are like to a ridiculous degree where they're basically impossible to animate with traditional 2D animation. So, and this is not new information. If you look through the trailers, we've known the new designs for both Unit 2 and Unit 8 for like months now, for years now, for Unit 8 actually. So this is not new information, but it definitely is still disappointing. In general, it pretty much is just a CG affair. There are very few shots of the Evangelions ever drawn, and even when they are drawn, sometimes they aren't animated. Like, it will just be like, a still of a unit, just sitting in a hangar or something like that. So yeah, there's not a lot of 2D animation to be found in the films with regards to the action itself. In addition to this, what I find to be one of the main problems is that even when there is an action scene, I would say almost, I would say pretty much every single action scene in the movie is a pretty big snoozer to me. And this is mainly because of the choreography. So even going back to End of Evangelion, I feel like the mass production units versus Asuka fight is like one of the best examples of Sakuga, or just like, animation, key animation in general. Like, it's great to look at, it has such momentum, it's art, you know what I mean? There's artistry to it, blah blah blah. But in this film, pretty much every Evangelion fight comes down to the putties and Power Rangers, and especially not just because of the choreography, because the choreography is pretty bad. Like, none of it's really fun, none of it's really inventive. Like, it's just a lot of ragdolling and like swinging. It's not fun. But the given the context of the film itself, so as you've seen in the trailers in the beginning, there's the fight with Mari in Paris, and this is a fight that has, one Ava unit, Unit 8, versus, which seems to be dozens of units, if not hundreds, and they're basically all cannon fodder. They're basically all putties from Power Rangers. They just hang around and they wait to get got by Mari. And in the film itself, so this is not a spoiler at all because they're shown in the trailer, but there is, of course, the sequence with Unit 8 and Unit 2 together descending into the Gates of Guff, and you see all those other Evangelions flying around. And I can just say that that fight as well is basically completely just Power Rangers. Like, they're just fodder. Like, there's basically, when it comes to the enemies in the film, basically no love is really ever given to them when they're just these CG masses of hundreds. And with that scene specifically, there are basically hundreds of Evangelions, and it doesn't really make sense the choreography they choose to go with, a fight of 2 versus hundreds. So yeah, so disappointing on that front. And if I did rank it to other CG animation that you can find in like TV anime, I would say it's definitely above something like X-Arm, which just came out this last season, yikes. And I would say it's even above Polygon Pictures, which pushes out all of those CG shows on Netflix all the time. But then when you compare it to a studio like Studio Orange, who did Land of the Lustrous and Beastars, yeah, I would not say it's as good as that animation. And actually, if I could throw it in there, comparing it to even Ruby, which is a Western net animation, I would actually say that even though the models themselves are better than what you can find in Ruby, the choreography is not. Ruby actually does have really great choreography that people actually put a lot of heart and soul into. And just to finish up with a quick comment on the actual 2D animation in the film, the Sakuga for the film, the key animation. Of course, there are highlights, there are some scenes that really do look great, but overall, I would say that they're pretty much few and far between, and even what there is isn't particularly amazing, either when it comes to animating action scenes or just character movement. So if you've been on Twitter long enough and like you follow enough anime accounts, you can like follow a lot of Japanese animators, and shows I don't even watch, like right now is, what is it? Wonder Egg Priority is airing, and also Black Clover, which I'm not following the anime at all, but almost every week I just have insane Sakuga animation from people who are just sharing their own cuts that they did for these series. On the other hand, for Evangelion, of course, they can't share any of those cuts yet, but I do follow a lot of the Evangelion animators, and I guess the main difference between what I see for these more modern anime and Evangelion is that these key animators that have been working on it are still kind of the same staff. They're these guys who have been working on Evangelion since the 90s. So I'm not really sure if that is part of the reason why there is kind of a lack of, new creativity in the movies, but it definitely is missing that kind of more modern spunk that anime has nowadays. Number 2, music. So the music for the film so far, even 3.0, I wasn't really big on 3.0's music in the beginning because of how much I related it to the movie itself, but once I was able to divorce it, I do like the music of 3.0 quite a bit. And in this movie as well, the music is pretty good. They make some interesting new decisions on where to go with the music, but it's still rather enjoyable. I would say that the highlight of the film is actually a bit where they choose a song that is pretty, which kind of feels like it's clashing with the genre, not just the genre actually, more with the tone of the Evangelion movie so far, and then even this final film itself, and it's really enjoyable because of that. It kind of feels like, when in Evangelion you get Comb Sister Todd, so you get this, apocalyptic incident, and you have this like cheery pop song. So it is not like that. It is not that exact same clashing of tones or genres, but there is an instance in this movie where they do a clashing like that, and it's just fun. Like, it's a song that you wouldn't expect to just be the background music all of a sudden. So that was enjoyable. On the other hand, going back to Comme Sister Todd, I think that is one of also the greatest parts of the original Neon Genesis continuity. Not just the song itself being portrayed against this background, but also all of the execution that goes with that. The cuts and the flashbacks to the TV series being played in the movie over Shinji's mental journey and going into instrumentality, all of that is just so good. In a way, you can kind of just watch that scene over and over again, almost like it was a music video that had a story that you actually wanted to watch while you're listening to the music. Like, perfectly interconnected in that way. In this film, I would say not only is there never a moment like that, but I would say that the music can actually be very distracting, especially towards the end of the movie. It never comes seamlessly together in that kind of way. There's never really that big moment of, you know, Comme Sister Todd, or even in the second Evangelion film, with both the insert song being used during the Asuka and Unit 3 incident, or even during the 10th Angel incident. So nothing ever comes onto that level at all, but it is quite strange because I feel like the movie is trying to, and so that was a pretty big letdown. Number 3, story. Alright, so this is going to be the juicy part of the video. Basically, and again, this is not going to be spoilers. I'm going to try to keep it spoilers as minimal as possible, but I think I will say some things that probably people will maybe even get upset about, even though they haven't seen the movie. So if they want to get more specifics on it, or just even know a little bit more about my thought process, you can go ahead and ask in the comments. Again, please try to hide your comments by pressing enter so that other people can't see them if your comments are even remotely spoilery in some way. Alright, so this movie is the fourth in a series of 4 movies. This movie is supposed to finish the story of the previous 3 movies that started almost 14 years ago. So this movie has 14 years of baggage, basically, that it is supposed to deliver on. It is the final movie, it is the longest movie, and they have tons of time. So I saw this movie 3 times in one day, and basically my experience with it was that the first time I watched it, I was kind of stuck in neutral on it. Like, I couldn't really form an opinion on the film. In hindsight, that's what we like to call denial. The second time I saw the movie, it was a rough experience, a very rough experience. I was kind of uncomfortable, actually, like in my chair, because basically everything that I was kind of hesitant on the first time watching it, because, you know, when you're watching the beginning of the movie, you haven't finished it, so you don't know what's coming yet. Like, you can't really look at hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. But the second time around, I knew exactly what was coming, and it was very hard to just be like, oh no, like everything I was kind of in denial on, or like hesitant about, like maybe I just didn't understand it, very slowly became very apparent that it's like, no, it just is doing that. It is just that kind of movie that is just going with that kind of flow for some reason. But I will say, the third time I watched the movie, I actually did enjoy myself. And I enjoyed myself in kind of a trolly way, where it was actually kind of fun because I could just sit back and enjoy the stupidity of the movie. And that is, of course, going to sound harsh, but I feel like it's just the most honest answer. It's just, it's just kind of stupid. And so, you know, sometimes you can just watch stupid stuff and enjoy it. So I enjoyed it from that perspective. The thing I would not do is I would not call the movie a good movie. And I wanted to mention all that because my genuine recommendation to anybody who has slightly spoiled themselves and they're concerned about the film, and they're like, they want to wait, but they're not sure they can wait, like they just can't help themselves, or maybe they're thinking they shouldn't wait because it's just going to make them even more disappointed when it happens. I would say my genuine recommendation is to read the spoilers. So some personal history with me and my viewing experience for the films. I saw the first film pretty blind going in. I knew it was basically just a rehash, so I wasn't expecting much different. But after watching it, the second movie had already come out in Japan, so I literally just went online and I just read the spoilers. Like, I knew pretty much everything that happened in the second movie before I saw it. But like almost a year later, when I finally did see it, because it finally came out in America, it was so good. Like, the second movie was basically unruinable by spoilers. Like, if anything, knowing the spoilers like enhanced the experience because I knew everything that happened. The only thing I really had to judge the movie on is just the execution. Like, how well are they going to tell this story? Like, how hard are they going to hit these points that I know are going to happen. And they hit them really hard. They hit them out of the park, basically. It was a great experience. And at the time that 2.0 came out, 3.0 wasn't even out in Japan yet, so I did not spoil myself, and I continued with that. I just decided not to. So I pretty much went pretty blind into 3.0, and in hindsight, I don't know if that was the best idea. I actually think that I probably would have enjoyed 3.0 more if I knew going in all of the twists and I could just kind of enjoy it for its execution. Ultimately, though, I still would not have come to the conclusion that it was a good movie, though, or that it was executed well, but I think I would have enjoyed the experience more. Just, not being kind of in denial while actually watching the film itself. So if your experience with 3.0 sounds anything similar to that, I'm going to say that your experience with this final film will probably also be along those same lines. So that's why I would probably recommend just spoil yourself. Even if the movie comes out by the end of this year in theaters in the West, or even if it comes out like this summer streaming, like hopefully that's going to be months down the line, it seems like. And I would say even if it's like a month down the line, the more time you get between the plot of the movie and seeing the movie, I think the more you'll be able to just accept it for what it is and kind of enjoy it as a viewing experience. So another thing for the third time why I enjoyed it so much is because no matter what, even if this movie was utter garbage, complete trash, the movie would still be engaging to me from a historical and from like a societal standpoint. Like Evangelion is like one of the biggest anime franchises of all time. It is definitely worth $18 to me. I'm not going to say it's a good movie. Like if the director came and asked me like, "Oh, did you think the last movie was good?" I'd be honest. I'd be like, "No, it's garbage, but it was worth $18. Like it is it's like reading a very informative textbook on like something that you're interested in." I don't think that the work itself as a whole is worthless. It's not worthless. It's just not what I would call a good film. So next, I kind of just want to go over the basic reasons, totally non-spoilery, the basic reasons why I did not like the movie. So one of the first things I would like to say is that going into the film, what I wanted it to feel like a movie that could have only come out after 9 years. Because it was delayed so many times, this movie is, technically, it has been delayed 12 years. So it's been pushed like a total of 4 times across 12 years, and it's had like 5 different release windows. So that journey on this film, that has definitely been a thorn in the side of fans who have been sticking around since 2007 when the first movie came out. So even if the movie was bad, I did just genuinely want it to feel like something that could not have come out earlier than this. Something that felt like, you know what, even though it took 9 years, and even though they could have done a good job, even after 1 year like they originally planned, even after 2 years or 3 years, like 3 years is how long 3.0 took, this movie is coming out 9 years later, so I just hope it feels like something that could have only come out 9 years later. And it does not feel like that at all. What I would say though, is that it feels like we got this movie because they've waited 9 years. That this was a movie that ended up this way because they waited 9 years to make it, but it's not a movie that they could not have made after 1 year. I think if they had made the movie like they planned after 1 year after 3.0, it would not have been this movie. It would have been very different. If they had made it 2 years, it would have been very different from this movie. But just because that's the case, this movie in no way feels like it has been worked on or given 9 years of effort and thought process and just in general heart. And again, going back to 3.0, I'm obviously going to be comparing to 3.0 a lot. One of my main problems with 3.0 was I couldn't feel the heart in it. 3.0 did feel like a very committee movie, if that makes any sense. Like it felt like it was made by a company that was trying to make a product. It was not made by people who were trying to tell a story or who were invested in that story itself. And for this final film, even though there's obviously very specific things that are trying to get you to feel emotional and that are trying to tug on, your heartstrings as an Evangelion fan, none of them felt that genuine to me. It still felt very calculated and soulless. Alright, and the other big reason why I did not like the movie was because of answers. Evangelion doesn't always give you every single answer, but I think people go overboard in saying how cryptic the original TV series was. Like, I feel like pretty much any question you still had at the end of the TV series, you could go back and, look into it a little bit deeper, and you could be like, oh, actually, I see how they were alluding to this, that makes it make sense. but it's never integral to the actual story. And a lot of the times, the main thing is the characters. Like, do the characters' arcs in the show make sense for the information that they are given? And they do. For the new movies, 3.0 specifically was such this unique case of a movie basically not committing to anything. It is kind of the ultimate, to get nerdy with it, Schrodinger's cat of movies. Like, you can't really say you knew what was going on in 3.0 because we knew basically nothing about the motivations or the mechanics of how this world was working. And to be brutally honest for this final movie, probably anybody who is looking forward to answers, if in any way you needed answers to these things for this final movie to be good to you, there's a 95% chance you will not get them. This movie not only does not provide answers, in certain situations, I would actually say that it retcons things. In addition, if you don't want to call them retcons, there are just some straight up plot holes. There are reveals in this movie that basically make no sense with not just what was established in 3.0, but going back to 1.0 and 2.0, just plot holes that do not make sense with what literally happened in the span of these movies themselves. So yeah, if this final movie, part of your enjoyment of it, or part of your, or even the possibility of you being able to like it, is predicated on the fact of it fixing 3.0 in some way, or of it redeeming 3.0 in some way, it does not. It actually makes 3.0 even worse. So that's the thing, is now, safely, I can say, after the final movie has come out now, conclusively, 3.0 is pretty much an objectively bad movie. Like, there are so many things in 3.0 now that just do not make sense with what has ultimately been decided with what the characters were actually trying to do. So yeah, basically 3.0 is just a bundle of plot holes. And I will say this though, in a way, you basically don't even need to watch 3.0. Like, 3.0 is basically entirely skippable as a movie. The only reason you would need to watch 3.0 from the standpoint of finishing the story with this film is to understand where Shinji is at the beginning of it in terms of being, comatose from Karu's death. That is really one of the only things that carries over from that movie onto the story of this one. Alright, and the final thing I do want to mention about why I don't like the movie, so I went over, like, I wanted it to feel like a 9-year journey. It does not. This is a movie they could have easily written, like, in a year. It kind of feels like something they could have come up with in 2 hours over a nice dinner meal, jotted it down on a napkin or something. Second thing, the movie does not only not address the problems with 3.0, but it actually basically makes 3.0 even worse. And the final thing is just, as a movie, as its own self-contained story, it does not make the characters believable to me. One of the biggest failings in 3.0 to me was basically the erasure of Shinji as a person to me. And what I mean by this is that you right now, looking at the screen or listening to this in another tab or something, ask yourself, is Shinji a real person? And Shinji is not. Hopefully you answered that way. Hopefully you know that. Shinji is not a real person. He has never existed. He will never exist. He is fiction. But that's kind of the beauty and like the genius of storytelling, of movies, of books, of everything, is that there are these people we can get so invested in, these stories we can get so invested in, and at the end of the day, they're not even real. And how that's done is they make you believe. They make you believe in these characters. They make you believe in this world and this setting. And for 3.0, because it was this Schrodinger thing where you could not say definitively, is it this, is it that, like, it could have settled in a quantum position state with this final movie where actually things did make sense, actually things were this way, everything made sense. But that's not what happens with this movie. But in 3.0 itself, there was only one character who pretty definitively was settled into a position of eradication in my brain, and that was Shinji. Like, at the end of the movie, I did not buy Shinji as a person. The movie basically erased Shinji as a character to me. All Shinji is a vehicle for the creators, be that the multiple directors on the different sections, or the chief director Anno himself, or even the people who are responsible for the scenarios and the scripts. Like, Shinji as a person was not believable to me by the end of that movie. All the other characters were basically on thin ice. With this final movie, Shinji actually is pretty good. Shinji's actually pretty believable. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like you kind of don't even have to watch 3.0 now. Like, if you just kind of read the cliff notes of 3.0 and go into this final movie, Shinji is a much better character because he basically is just, like, eradicated in the previous film. But on the other hand, monkey paw situation, we got Shinji back, but almost the entire rest of the cast, their motivations contained within this film itself. Like, not only do they not make sense because of plot holes and because they're retconning things, but given the ways they try to retcon things, and given the way that they try to explain things, the characters, like, at worst, they're not believable. Like, they just don't make any sense, which I'd say some of them, yeah, they just don't make any sense. And at best, they're just awful human beings. Like, they're just, like, objectively, like, if you look at the situation and you don't think that they're being a bad person, like, I don't know what to say to you. Like, that's how the world works. Like, we should be able to agree on very simple things. Like, if you do this and you have these kind of beliefs, you're not a good person. And that's fine if your work has bad people in it. You know what I mean? But the problem is when they're not portrayed as bad people. So I'm going to compare it to the original series, and I'm not doing this to say that this movie is bad just because it's different. That's totally fine if it's different. I like 2.0, and 2.0 is very different from the original series, just from the characters' motivational standpoints. But the thing is that in the original series, the characters are very effed up. They're very troubled individuals, but the series treats them that way. Like, that's the point. The point is that they're troubled, and their struggles with that is part of the story. What they're not is they're not irredeemable. They're not complete and utter a-holes, and most of all, when they are a-holes, the series doesn't treat that like it's a good thing. For this movie, there are characters who, when you break down their actions, they are just being bad people. They're just being bad people, and the movie is basically ignoring that because it's not because they hope you don't notice it. I think it's genuinely because the creators don't notice it. And I don't think it's necessarily because if you were to point it out to them and be like, hey, you're actually kind of, sending a bad message here that these characters aren't a-holes, they'd be like, oh my god, you're right, they actually are a-holes. But, for some reason, after 9 years, they just don't have that. They don't have anybody who is pointing things out like that. And I guess I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I think it is just a situation where they're not thinking that deeply about it. But who knows, maybe there is a part of them that does just genuinely side with these bad ethics. So I don't know. Alright, and there's one last thing I want to mention about the film, and that's about commitment to your own story. And one of the reasons, probably the biggest reason, that I did not like this movie is it has no backbone. It is a very cowardly movie, and it basically does not want to commit to anything. This kind of goes back to the answers, but the reason why I'm mentioning it at the end of my review is because, for the most part, it has to do with, the conclusion of the story, the conclusion of this final movie, which is the conclusion of the conclusion, is that it does not commit in a way that I feel like most people would want or would find satisfying. So that is one of the big reasons why I did not like this film, ultimately. Alright, and so that's it for today's video. I just kind of wanted to get this out before I sat on it for too long. I've just kind of been stewing on it the past couple days. I'm like, do I really want to go that hard on this movie? Like, how am I actually going to address it? Should I make, like, a short written review or just, like, an off-the-cuff thing? So I'm just kind of doing this, like, longer, more ranty review version of it. After this, I would still like to do, like, a full summary of the movie if I can. There's actually a lot of information that has come out online. So if you have any questions about, like, the context of, maybe some spoilers you've seen online. But yeah, this has pretty much been the end of my journey with Evangelion, and definitely the most positive aspect of the film itself to me is the fact that I feel released now. Like, I do genuinely feel better that the movies are finally over. I kind of do just wish if this was the movie we were going to get, they would have just did it in 2013, 2014, 2015, any time earlier to just get it over with. But yeah, Evangelion is finally done now, and that is definitely a positive in my book, and I feel so much weight lifted off me as a fan because of it. When I really think about it, this is the first time as an adult Evangelion has never, been an aspect of my life now. So now, in terms of my own life without Evangelion, you might say that I'm entering my own Neon Genesis.